Everybody, this is John Spalding with NEXUSforChange.org. Welcome to the New Rules for Women, Revolutionizing the Way Women Work Together webinar in partnership with the International Society for Organizational Development and Change, presented today by Dr. Ann Litwin and hosted by Kimberly Barker from ISODC. So thank you all for being with us. We're going to go ahead and get some technology stuff out of the way. And so let's get our stuff set up. There is an option in here to put your hand up and put your hand down. You guys can put your hand up if you can hear me okay, unlike last week. Hopefully you all can. So if you can hear me, put your hand up. Bruce, thank you for putting your hand up, and thank you for sticking with us last week. Valerie, thanks for being here. We appreciate it. Anyone else, if you can or want to put your hand up. Hi, Regina. Great. And everyone else is kind of pinging in right now, so that's awesome. In our chat room, if you look at that yellow box, if you click the triangle next to the word chat in your GoToWebinar viewer down, if you click that open, it says, welcome to our NEXUS session, featuring Ann Litwin and hosted by ISODC. If you click on that link, it'll open up our parallel chat room where we can all join in and share questions and thoughts and reactions to the session. So if you want to go there now, go ahead. If it doesn't work for you, sometimes the firewall doesn't work, feel free to go in and use the questions tab on the GoToWebinar control panel. So this screen here is just a possible what you want to look. You want to open up another window and have the chat room, and then you can have the webinar off to the side. So you can have the webinar viewer on one side of your screen and the chat room viewer on the other. Like I said, if you can't use Chatsy, just open up the questions tab and send them in, and I will bring them in during the Q&A sessions for the content. So first, we're going to get started with our first poll, and that is, in which part of the world do you live? And we'll go ahead and launch that poll. Do you live in the Americas, Asia, Europe, Africa, or other? You can enter it in the chat. And give you about 30 seconds. Most of you have already voted. 30 seconds to get your votes in. And then we'll close the poll. A little bit different makeup than we had last time. It looks like some of the people that came from Europe were not able to join this time. So I'll go ahead and close it and share the results. The Americas, 90%, and Africa, 10%. So it's still good to have diverse representation. And we will go to our next one. And our next slide, our next poll is, what perspective do you bring today? So are you an internal leader? Are you an external consultant? Are you a student? Are you a scholar, instructor, professor, or another activist or leader? And half of you voted. We'll give you about 15 more seconds, and then we'll close it and show the results. Keep them coming. All right, so we have 27% are internal leaders, 45% are external consultants, 18% are scholar, instructor, professors, and 9% are other activists or leaders. Great, so thank you all very much for being here. I'm going to go ahead and get our slides back up. And so what I'm going to do now is turn it over to Kim Barker from the International Society for Organizational Development and Change. She is going to talk a little bit about the society, and then she's going to introduce today's speaker, and we'll get right into today's session. So hi, Kim.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, John. On behalf of the International Society for Organization Development and Change, sorry, I had a phone call. I would like to welcome you to today's webinar. I would also like to encourage you to check out the ISODC website for more information regarding membership benefits. Membership benefits include free access to the OD Journal, the most widely cited OD journal in the world, access to the OD newsletter, webinars such as this one, conferences, and other collaborative opportunities from all over the globe. We have special student opportunities that will sharpen your skills, friendship and support for both scholars and practitioners, and a collegial environment that will strengthen your practice. For more information, please go to www.isodc.org. We also have an upcoming conference in October that has just been added to our website as well in Vermont. I would like to thank Dr. Ann Litwin for joining us today. I loved her latest book, and I believe everyone should read it. Dr. Litwin is a scholar, organization development consultant, and executive coach specializing in leveraging diversity, including gender differences, for business success. Her clients range from small nonprofits to Fortune 100 companies and have included corporations such as Alibaba, Hewlett-Packard, Lucent Technologies, Microsoft, Novartis, Pfizer Pharmaceuticals, Texas Instruments, and Verizon. Ann has also been named the CEO of her family business and chair of the Board of Trustees for the NTL Institute of Applied Behavioral Science. She is a co-editor of Managing in the Age of Change and has written numerous articles on gender differences and women's leadership. Dr. Litwin's presentation today draws from her dissertation research reflected in her latest book, New Rules for Women, Revolutionizing the Way Women Work Together. The book is filled with instructive and helpful workplace examples, exercises, and action steps for change. The New Rules for Women is a book not only for women managers and professionals, but for everyone who has a stake in a more productive workplace. Ann lives in Boston, Massachusetts, and I'd like to welcome Dr. Ann Litwin today.
Thank you, Kim. Well, I am really delighted with the opportunity to bring my research to you today because I'm really passionate about this topic. I care a great deal about women being successful in organizations, and I believe that our relationships with each other, as well as the support from allies and bosses in organizations, are essential for our success. And so I have some tips for you today. I'm going to share my research findings, or some findings from the research, and have some tips for you about things that you can do to create supportive work environments to help women. So specifically today, I am going to share with you 4 findings from my research. My screen is not moving, however. So I need a little help. My screen is frozen. Okay. John, can you help me?
Yeah, let's give me just a second and I will try to get the slide share on my end up.
All right.
And if there's some intro stuff that you want to do before then.
Well, I'm going to tell you about 4 of the findings, specific findings that I'm going to share with you today. There are more, of course, than that, but these are 4 that I think are might be of particular interest. And I'm going to talk about the findings, and at the same time, these are findings from my dissertation research, which I completed in 2010, and which are now at the heart of this book that I've just published called New Rules for Women. And I'm going to share the findings with you. My particular focus is going to be on creating, giving you some really practical tips and strategies for how to create supportive environments for women in your workplaces. So I hope you will, my intention is for you to leave with some very practical strategies. So, okay, we still can't get the slides to move, but I'll start telling you about the findings that I'm going to talk about. Specifically, I'm going to talk about 4 things. One is something I'm calling friendship rules, which I think are creating some confusion and disappointment for women about what to expect from each other in the workplace. So I'm going to talk about friendship rules. I'm also going to talk about another finding that emerged from the research about how women leading women is different. I think that when women have to use a different leadership style when they're leading women than when leading men, and I'm going to talk about that and how from the research. I'm going to talk about some double binds that women leaders face, and I'm going to talk about what leaders can do to support women being successful, women, both male and female leaders. So those are the 4 topics I'm going to cover. And while we're still working on the slides, one of the things I'm going to do now is just tell you a little bit about, okay, great, thank you. We just got the slides moving. See, all right, except now they are not moving. All right, oh no, not that, okay. Oh, now they're moving, all right. So I want to tell you a little bit about the context. Thank you very much. The context for my doing this research. So as I know Kim mentioned, I've been a consultant and a coach, an executive coach for more than 30 years now. And over the years, I work with both women and men, but over the years, I just felt that I heard too many painful stories from my women clients about not feeling supported by other women at work. And it really bothered me. It upset me because I feel that we have enough barriers and challenges as women in the workplace to deal with without having to watch our backs with the other women. So I felt that I really wanted to do something, make some contribution to being able to change this dynamic so that women would feel more supported by each other. But I mean, where to begin? It was quite bewildering. I had no idea until one day a young woman sales manager who was an executive coaching client came in for her session. And she came in complaining bitterly about an experience that she had just had with a woman customer. She was very hurt, and she felt personally betrayed. And this is what she said. She said, I just found out that a client that I've worked with for a long time has decided to change vendors. And she's no longer working with either me or my company. And she said, and this is the worst part, she said, the worst part is I had to find out about this from someone else and not from her. And then she said, and you've got to get the whole attitude behind this. She said, who does she think she is? I thought she was my friend. And then she said, I would have expected this from a man, but not from a woman. And I thought, really? I mean, isn't this just business? I mean, people change vendors. I mean, and then I realized, no, what's interesting here is this expectation of personal loyalty from a woman that she doesn't expect from men. And I realized, well, wait a minute, this is familiar. Actually, if I think about it, I've heard a similar theme from other women coaching clients. And so I got curious about, well, what is it where might this expectation of personal loyalty from women be coming from, and how might the workplace context be contributing to this expectation? And I, at that point, was just going back to school to begin my PhD, which I completed in 2010. And I decided this is going to be my dissertation topic. And so I hoped, of course, as you always do with any kind of research, that I was going to find something useful that would actually be helpful to people and help change this dynamic, and I think I did. So I'm very delighted to be able to bring to you now some of the findings from this research. So let me tell you just a little bit about the research. It was a qualitative study of women in a range of sectors, healthcare, technology, government. I was able to include women banking in a range of sectors, and because I work internationally quite a lot, I was able to collect data in some other countries, not only the US. So I was able to collect data in Spain, China, India, and Mexico in addition to the US. So I was able to get some international perspective in terms of cultural differences. Now, this is one of the paradoxes, one of the challenges of doing research on women in organizations, is that we're so different. We have so many differences. I was really concerned about how am I going to do anything that's going to be useful in any kind of general way to women when we're so different. But I did find that I could, by taking a both-and approach, I could both talk about, discover and talk about ways that we're differences and some similarities that we have in our experiences in organizations. So I have worked very hard to do both of these things in my book. Today, because of our short time frame, you might hear me making a lot of generalizations and not always teasing out the cultural differences, for which I apologize. I will do my best. But I do take this challenge very seriously in the book. So I want to talk about the first finding that emerged, which was really a surprise to me, and it's something I'm calling friendship rules. And what do I mean by friendship rules? Well, these are relational expectations that we begin to develop very early in life, and that then I think these expectations really emerged as a major theme that cut across many of the findings. So I'm going to talk about this first, and then we'll take a look at some ways that friendship rules might show up. So these are relational expectations. We begin to develop them very early in life. My step-granddaughter, at the age of 4, I was in the middle of doing my research, so I was very tuned into this. At the age of 4, she was starting to really examine seriously what does it mean to be a friend, and how do you make a friend, and how do you lose a friend? And she was starting to really grapple with figuring that out, and I thought, wow, this is young. And then I was able to look at there's quite a bit of really excellent research that's been done on adolescent girls. Now, my focus is on adult women in the workplace, but I wanted to read everything I could that might be related to our experience as adult women in the workplace. So I read this adolescent research and several studies, and they talk about how really focus on relationship and on friendship is very, very central for girls in the middle school years. If you have any girls in your life between the ages of 9 and 13, you will know that very likely that one of the central focuses for them is how to get to be popular, how to be part of the popular group, or why they're not invited to the parties, or why they are invited to the parties, or how to be a friend. It's very central. But then the literature goes on to say that by the time these girls become young women in high school, it's not so central anymore as a focus. And then by the time we become adult women, we're really not conscious at all of our friendship expectations or friendship rules, but we have them. We still have them. However, they become unconscious, and I think that one of the things that might be happening is that we internalize them. They become filters through which I think we are evaluating our interactions with other women in the workplace, but we're not aware that we're doing it. So I think it's an important filter, and it's unconscious, and this becomes a very important part of what I think might be going on here. So one of the interesting things about women's friendship rules is that, and we're going to take a look in a moment at some examples of some very common ones. One of the things that I think might be going on is that women's friendship rules, and this is a big generalization, but it's a strong theme, are very kind of flat structured, very egalitarian. I don't know if you can see my hands, but I'm holding them to show a very flat structure, very egalitarian. And I think one of the things that may be happening is that we are carrying these very flat structured expectations into a hierarchical masculine workplace. And I think they may be setting us up to be very confused about what to expect from each other. Because if I expect this very flat structured behavior, but you are behaving like this because it's what you have to do to be successful in a hierarchical organization, then I think that maybe a way in which these dynamics, the structure of organizations, masculine hierarchical organizations, are setting us up to be confused about what to expect from each other. And I say now men have friendship rules as well. They're different though, and there's quite a lot that's been written about the differences in what we call feminine culture, masculine culture. Men's friendship rules are very sort of task-focused and status-focused. And in fact, most organizational cultures reflect men's friendship rules because they were there first. And so we can operate in a hierarchical masculine culture. We can be bosses of other people. We can operate very well. But I think that that may be setting us up with the other women, and it may be part of why why women in my study often said that they preferred working for men, because they knew what to expect from men, and they didn't know what to expect from women. And I think that underneath that possibly could be these friendship rules. Now, I'm going to show you this list of common rules in a moment, but I want to just give you a little more context. I did, one of the things I did in preparation for doing the research was to go out and read everything I could find that had been written about women's friendships. And there had been quite a lot written, primarily about Western white women's friendships, I think I would say, literature coming out of Europe and the US. And they found a common core of friendship expectations, but all of this writing was focused on women's relationships outside of the workplace. And that's where my research came in to fill a gap, was that there wasn't really much written about women's relationships in the workplace. So one of the questions I had was, will what women talk about in terms of what they friendship expectations are inside of organizations be similar or different from what the literature outside of organization describes? And what I found was that my research participants validated the common core list of friendship rules that was in the general adult literature. So now I'm going to show you this list of common friendship rules. Now, let me just say, we're not all the same, of course. We don't all have the same friendship rules, and these are by no means all of the friendship rules that exist in the world between women, within women. But these are just some very common ones. Now take a look. Just read the list. Now, when I'm making this presentation to a live audience, it's often at about this point that this chuckle kind of rolls across the room. And when I say, okay, what's going on? What's the chuckle about? People will often, usually, almost always say, bring up a couple of things. The first one is the very last friendship rule on the list, which is that it's a friendship rule not to discuss our friendship rules. This is a very significant friendship rule. I'm going to talk more about it in a moment, but it's really quite important. I mean, actually, if you think about it, I know this is true for me, and again, we're not all the same, but my research participants, and I know for myself in my own life, described finding it very, very difficult, if not impossible, to talk about with another woman, to talk with her when they felt disappointed or upset by something that she did. In fact, I just had a coaching client come in a couple of weeks ago complaining because she'd gotten a promotion and she expected her good friend and colleague to be happy for her, and the good friend and colleague, a woman, was not happy for her, and she felt so hurt and disappointed. And I said, well, did you talk to her about it? And she said, no, as I knew she would. And I heard the same excuses from her that I hear over and over again, coaching clients and also from my research participants, about there are these perfectly logical explanations, right? She knows what she did. I shouldn't have to tell her. Or, well, I don't trust her now, so why would I bother? There are a whole list like that, but I think that really what's being expressed here is this taboo almost about discussing our friendship expectations or relationship expectations with other women. It can feel like it's taboo. Now, there are cultural differences on this one for sure, and this may be more so true for white Western women, Latino women, and in some cases Asian women, than for, say, African American women, who tend to have a more direct culture, which they evolved for survival reasons. But it's a strong taboo. It can feel like a taboo. Now, the other reason the audiences often chuckle is when you look at this list, of course, you can see that a number of these things contradict each other. And so there's really absolutely no way you can do this, everything on this list, and not get into trouble somehow in your relationships. If you kept sworn to keep a confidence of someone, but then you share their information with someone else in order to build to bond with another woman, you've betrayed the first woman. So anyway, there are lots of contradictions in here, and that's one of the sources of the chuckles. Now, I am going to share a case study with you and ask you to reflect on how you see some of these friendship rules showing up, if you can see them, because I want to just take a look with you for a moment, because this was such a central theme about how this can actually operate in the workplace. So here's a case. I'm going to read it to you, and then we're going to give you another poll, and the question will be, what friendship rules do you see operating? And you will have a list of the friendship rules to choose from if you see any of them. So here's the case. I went to work for a friend, and she would actually overstep her professional boundaries. Before she was my boss, we would have friendly chats at night. But now she would call me to give me tasks to do late at night. During the workday, she would ask me to go and pick up her son at school, and we had an administrative person, but she would never think to ask her to do that stuff for her. Then I got an offer outside of the company, and I told her. She really took it personally. She acted like I was betraying her, you know? So now the poll. What friendship rules do you see operating?
So the poll is open. 6% of you voted. 18% the votes are coming in. So, and we'll close it in about 10 seconds. Let's just see the percentage of people responding to the poll go up a little bit more. And they're able to, the way this poll is set up, and they're able to select more than one. And so I think you'll see in the results that that are coming in that there's a couple that are heavy hitters, and then there's some other ones that are being mentioned somewhat, but a little bit less. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll, and then I'll share the results. And so if you can see, there you go. Yeah. Can you see that, Ann? Okay, good.
I can. Yes, I can. Unswerving loyalty is 100% see that one operating, and don't discuss the friendship rules. Definitely, a lot of people see that one operating, and the others as well. Some people see the others as well. And I think that this is a very good, thank you, John. Let's go on to the next slide. I think that this is a very good, oh, my slides are now frozen again. This is a very good reflection that you had, because in fact they are all operating, or to some degree, a lot of them are operating. Jane and her boss did not discuss how their roles needed to change when they changed their relationship from being friends to her becoming boss subordinate. And they needed to talk about that because they were in a different kind of relationship now, right? There was a power difference now that hadn't existed when they were friends. And because of the power difference, it wasn't easy for Jane to say, I don't like it when you call me late at night and give me tasks. But they needed to have this conversation really before they changed their roles, or at least know that along the way they needed to check in with each other about how the relationship was working. So this was a real case. It was an actual situation. Their friendship did not survive, not surprising. And of course, the boss did expect loyalty, and that wasn't really fair, right? And so all of those things were operating. Okay, slide's still frozen, but let me ask you, what is it that any questions that you might have? Let's go to the question slide.
So, Ann, can you hear me?
Yes.
And
yes.
Hey, Kim, just 1 second, okay?
Okay. Uh-huh.
So, Ann, just so you know, I've been running the slides off of my computer since yours is frozen, so
okay.
That's why they don't move. So just cue me when you want me to go to the next one, and I will. And then for everybody out there, if you're not in the chat room, I see Regina and Bruce in the chat room. If you open the chat, piece on your GoToWebinar control panel, you can join us over in Chatsy and ask questions. And if not, just put your questions into the questions tab on the GoToWebinar control panel. And then maybe towards the end we can experiment if there are some people here that want to ask a question live, and if you're willing, maybe we can unmute a couple people and bring them in live at the end and ask a couple questions too.
Okay, so maybe we'll just do something very brief right now, and then so we'll make sure we have time at the end for any open chatting.
So, and Bruce had a question. Actually, he had a comment first. He said he prefers a rule set close to what you have found for women, but he wanted a clarification on unswerving loyalty. I think you kind of addressed that just a second ago, but could you discuss that a little bit more?
Well, I think that loyalty trumped everything for Jane's boss, right? The fact that Jane had an opportunity that would have been good for her career and good for her life wasn't in the equation for Jane's boss. She expected sort of undying loyalty, if you will, which isn't a realistic expectation in a work setting or work relationship.
Thank you.
Okay.
And then this girl named Kim had a question. And and she was wondering, do you feel any of the rules are easier for young women today, younger women, particularly millennials?
Yes, you know, that question often comes up. I don't feel I have the data to answer that question. So I think that is a study I might like to do someday. Okay. Certainly the adolescent girl literature that I read, which is really very recent, did not find any basic differences in girls' expectations or in the messages that the girls are receiving about being female. And so that's all the data I have on that.
Okay.
Good question. You. Okay. All right, well, let's move on then, and we'll make sure we pick up some time at the end for some open questions. But I think I want to build now on the friendship rules and on the story about, on the friendship rules, to talk a little bit about something that came up clearly from the research around women leading women, because I do think it's different. My research participants felt it was different as well. If you think about the friendship rules, women do expect a little more of a relationship from other women. And we think about the opening story as well about my coaching client who had this expectation of her woman client that was different than for men. I think there's an expectation that women bosses have to deal with when they're leading women. Now I want to go to the next slide because there's a very, very good example from one of the research participants that was just a good example. I mean, I heard this many times from my research participants, but Sherry, who worked for a large technology company, just made it crystal clear in the way she said it. And she said, I had a woman boss who was more task-focused, and it made it harder for me to work for her. With a guy, I would have expected a task focus, but I expected a little bit more of a relationship from her. It was all she could do to say, how was your weekend? And that made it real uncomfortable for me. If a guy did that, it wouldn't bother me as much. Now, this is an example of the kind of thing I heard over and over again from my research participants, and you can see it in there, right? The different expectation of women bosses than of men bosses. And I think that, that one of the problems for women is that women bosses are expected to invest the time to build relationships, to listen and build trust in order to motivate women employees. They're expected to do that. It may not be their natural style, just because we're women doesn't mean we have a feminine leadership style, or we're men we have a masculine leadership style. Just as Bruce's question demonstrated earlier, where he's more comfortable with women's friendship rules. It's not that it's anything absolute here, but we're talking about themes and trends. And the women generally then expect more of a relationship from women bosses. And for the women who don't have a feminine leadership style, I had one participant in the study say, I hate wasting time chatting with the women. She was a supervisor of women. I hate wasting time chatting with the women, but I've learned if I don't do it, I don't get the productivity that I need. So it's, I think, something women have to do. It takes time. They have to invest the time, and men don't have to. Women don't expect it from the men. And so I think that this is a way in which we need to understand that women have to have a wide range of leadership styles, and they have to invest the time with women that men don't have to, and they don't necessarily get the support to do that from their bosses. In fact, it's one of the double binds that women face, because the masculine norms of the workplace discourage relational work. The task-focused norms of the hierarchical workplace consider relational work a waste of time, and women bosses often get dinged for it on their performance reviews. And so it's a double bind, and yet if women don't do it, they don't get productivity. So I think that this is something that, one of those things that in order to create a supportive work environment for women, we need to understand that women are up against as women bosses. So I have a few coaching tips, yes, for women leading women. Let's go to the next slide. And so first one, of course, not a big surprise, will be that it's important to be friendly and relational with your female staff, even if that isn't your style. I think that women have to do it, and it's something we need to be aware of. Next. We need to share personal information about yourself within limits. I mean, if you think about the friendship rules, one of the friendship rules was about personal disclosure. Yes, there is a big cultural difference on this one, but it is a strong theme that in general women are expected to share more personal information about themselves, and you have to be sensitive to cultural differences in the process, right? One of the women in my study who was from the Middle East said to me when I asked about this, she said, "Don't ask me about my weekend because I won't tell you." It was very clearly in her culture not appropriate to share personal information at work, and that's true in many cultures. And so you have to know. You can't just make general blanket assumptions about women, about men. You have to know your people, and you have to know what their what's culturally appropriate for them. And that is a way of talking about friendship expectations, right? What is supportive behavior and what isn't. So we have to be able to name and negotiate our friendship expectations, and use something that I talk about in another presentation called role hats, in which we learn a tool. You can learn a tool for how to manage the boundaries between the different types of relationships that we can have with each other in the workplace. I talk about in that presentation being able to, I actually have hats made up that say friend, boss. You know, which hat have I got on right now? What are the expectations we've agreed to for when we are in these roles and we have these hats on? It's a tool for boundary management that works very, very well. And so we have to learn to be able to do that. And of course, look for opportunities to support other women. I think sometimes we don't pay enough attention to how we might do that, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But I do think that staying aloof for women bosses can really backfire on us. And often that's the advice that women get from mentors and role models is, you know, don't get too friendly with the people you supervise, because you might have to make a hard decision and you need to have some distance. But I don't think that that works for women. I think that generally speaking, women have to be relational, and that we need our bosses to support us in doing that when we are leading other women. Okay, so let's see if you have any questions on this. I've got one more section that we'll go to after this. Questions?
One person commented, Michelle Obama demonstrated some of these tips last night.
Yes, she did.
Yeah.
She did.
And I wanted to come in and say that I love the tool of the two different hats. My business partner and I use that tool regularly to have different discussions, because we were friends before we started the business, and so that can get mixed when you're discussing things and having nice discussions about, you know, taking company stuff forward. And so it's important to distinguish between the friend hat, the role hat, or I'm sorry, the friend hat, the business partner hat, and then it you know, depending on who the lead for the case is. So the
Great
kind of the
example.
manager or boss hat.
Yeah, great.
And someone also commented having morning huddles has helped them allow staff to share personal information before they get down to the business information, so that that can kind of not get out of the way, if you will, right?
Yeah, to make the space for the relational exchanges so that people can be more connected and more motivated to be on, good team members and so on. Great, that's great, terrific. All right, well, let me go through the last section and then we'll have some open time. So the last topic that I want to talk about is something called double binds. It's a funny picture, and it is how it feels, right? You feel like you're being pulled apart and you can't win for losing. And there are so many examples of double binds that came up out of my research from my research participants. And of course, there's also a lot that's been written lately, I think, as well on double binds. I write a weekly blog on gender issues in the workplace, and double binds from time to time, there's some new information that comes up on double binds for women that I write about. But certainly within the book, I talk about it as well. Now, I want to just share with you some examples of double binds because they're going to help us with the last section, which is what can leaders do to create supportive environments for women to be successful. So next slide, please. So here I've got 2 slides of double binds. So I want to just talk you through these and then we'll take a look at some tips for leaders. So these are some things that I think that women need to understand as well as their bosses. Bosses need to understand that women are dealing with these things. Very often we don't, as women in organizations, we think it's just us, that there's something we're doing wrong or there's something we're missing. And in fact, these things are happening to many women, and if we can understand it and talk about it with each other as well as tell our bosses what we need from them, I think it could make a big difference. So, of course, the first one is something we've already been talking about, which is that women's friendship rules are clashing with the hierarchical workplace. And I think that's a double bind, right? So we have to be able to be hierarchical and we have to deal with these expectations. Another double bind is that women in predominantly male teams and departments can adopt a masculine style. So women are often told in the performance reviews, well, you have to speak more in meetings, or you have to speak less in meetings, or I tell you this one, they're often told, you have to take a command and control kind of style. And when they do that, and we can do that, we can do it, but it doesn't work. What happens is we get labeled as the B word, and both women and men often complain that they don't like working for women who they experience as, too assertive, which they describe often as aggressive instead, because we're trying to adopt a masculine style based on what our mentors and bosses are telling us we need to do, but it doesn't work for us. And so that's a very common double bind for women. And women are seen then as women who are seen as competent and successful, and this is a really big double bind, are deemed unlikable. I mean, think about the double bind nature of this, right? If you are seen as competent and successful, you are deemed unlikable. We could be hearing about some of that in our current presidential election. I'm not sure, but it's possible. But it is a common double bind, and there's been quite a lot written about it lately, and it did come up in my research as well. We need to be aware of these things. Really. Next slide, please. As women advance in organizations, they feel pressured to not support other women. This came up as such a strong theme from my research participants. They were specifically told that they should not attend the women's this and the women's that, is how they put it, right? The women's forums, or the women's leadership programs, or the women's affinity groups, or they should not attend, and they were pressured not to promote other women. And so, especially as the higher they got up in the organization, they felt more and more pressure to not support other women, because there are, and I think this is one of the ways organizations are setting us up against each other. They are there are so few women at the top of organizations, in the top layers, that it can really, what the women in my study said to me is, it feels like there are limited spaces for women at the top. And so you've got to prove to the men who are there that you can be one of the boys by distinguishing yourself from the other women and saying, I'm not like them. And you have to, and it puts you in a position to see the other women as your competition for the limited slots that could become available. So they said to me, we see the other women as our competition, not the men. So it's another way in which the organizations set women up against each other that we really need to be able to see and talk about, and then strategize to change. Women are expected to help more, to mentor, to volunteer, which takes time, and the men are not expected to do that. And so it can impact our productivity, but it's an expectation. Now here's a good one. Women get interrupted more and shut down in meetings. Now, this did not come out of my research, but this was a study that came out very recently that shows that it's not a figment of our imagination, because women often talk about being interrupted more in meetings or having a hard time getting their ideas heard in meetings. There was a really significant study done that shows that actually, yes, this is happening. Women are getting interrupted more in meetings, and it shuts them down. And so it happens, and then the women just stop participating. So when I get in a moment to the slides about what leaders can do to help create supportive environments for women, this is one of them that leaders can really do a lot about. Another double bind is that women who speak more in meetings, and we're often told we have to speak up, get lower ratings for their effectiveness, while men who speak more in meetings are perceived as helpful. So double binds are things that don't make any sense, but that put us in a position of really not knowing how to be effective. And these are the things that we have to get up into the light of day, be able to talk about, and be supportive of each other and of the people to deal with, because they're really in our way. So next slide, I want to go right into looking at what leaders can do. Next slide, please. And the next one after that. So here are some tips and strategies, and then we'll open up for open conversation. Leaders can, women and leaders and male leaders, can make sure they are rewarding collaboration, teamwork, and relational work. I have heard so many stories, including one of my participants who was an engineer who was a team lead in an energy company of actually a mixed gender team, who had tremendous results, very, very good results from her team, but who was told in her performance review at the end of the year that her male manager was not going to either promote her or give her a merit raise because she wasted too much time coddling her team. And until he could see leadership behavior, which was command and control behavior, until I can see you acting like a leader, I cannot recommend you for promotion, he said. So this was the opposite, right, of what, and so she had a feminine leadership style in this case, and it worked very well for her, but it was not rewarded. And so this is what we need to take a look at in our organizations as leaders, is what are we rewarding? Leaders can institute a no interruption rule in meetings, and it can really make a difference. Leaders can ensure that there's equal participation in meetings. So you may not have noticed or been aware of interruption happening that has shut the women on the team down. But if you notice that they're not participating, then whatever caused it, make sure as a leader that you are ensuring equal participation, calling on the women, making sure their ideas are heard. Increase the number of women in leadership and on teams, because we have quite a bit of research now showing that when you increase the numbers of women, the dynamics shift, the culture shifts in the team and in the organization. and it becomes a more supportive environment for women. Next slide, and the final slide. Be an ally. Draw attention to women's contributions, whether women or men. So often women complain about their ideas not being heard. Make sure you can help each other. You don't have to agree with the ideas, but you can say, you know, I don't think we really spent enough time considering Jane's idea. Could we go back to that for a moment? Jane, would you tell us again what your idea was when you notice that a woman isn't getting heard? Form gender balanced panels for hires and promotions. It makes a big difference. Raise awareness of the double binds that women face. This is what I started out talking about in this section, is that so often we think it's just us alone who are having these experiences. And review policies and procedures for what we call second-generation bias that have a differential impact on women. So these are things, well-intended policies that are put into place that have an impact, an unintended impact that's different on women than on men. I just saw a study that came out about something called tenure extension, in which universities 20 years ago put it into place. And they were specifically focused on the STEM disciplines, science, technology, engineering, and math, put in place 20 years ago that when a couple had a new baby, and they were, let's say, they're both on the tenure track in a university, that both the woman and the man could have a 1-year extension on the 7-year limit to achieve tenure, and because of having a birth in their family. And so they instituted this policy, and what they're finding now is that it greatly helped the men get tenure and increased the tenure rates for men. It greatly reduced the tenure rates for women, because the men were using that year, that extra year, to work furiously on their research and to get all the publications that they could out so that they had a better chance at tenure, and the women were busy. They were dealing with the physical exhaustion of childbirth and labor, of nursing, of perhaps even carrying extra family responsibilities. They didn't have time to work on extra tenure papers, and so it was benefiting the men but not the women, hurting the women. So things like that, put in place for good intentions, having a differential impact. So I have many more examples of those kinds of policies and procedures, but I'll leave it at that for now. So let's take the time we have left to see what questions there might be, or what comments or what conversation you would like to have.
Great, thanks, Ann. And so for those of you out there, we're going to do this live. So if you have a microphone, or if you're using your phone and you want to ask a question for Ann, go ahead and raise your hand. I'll get in as many as I can for the time that we have left. And let's see. Any of you have any questions, go ahead and raise your hand and I will bring you in. Just make sure your microphone is unmuted. And in the meantime, if they're thinking of questions and trying to raise their hand, let me see. So we have one that's in the panel. Kim, did you have any?
So there was a question in the chat-see. Someone asked, while your research is recent, do you feel or have you found any new friendship rules that have come along since your book?
Oh, yes, of course. There are many friendship rules. I am just giving you a tiny example of some common ones, but people tell me all the time about friendship rules, particularly friendship rules that they've discovered have created damage in a relationship because the other person didn't have that friendship rule. And by the time they figured it out, it was kind of too late.
John had a great question. In this research, do double binds exist in organizations, in predominantly female organizations?
Well, you know, it's interesting. There's a couple of studies I saw that showed that predominantly female organizations, sometimes they have completely different cultures, and then the double binds aren't there, are not in the same way. But there are also a couple of studies that I've seen that show that, and sometimes female formed and dominated organizations replicate the hierarchical norms of the masculine workplace and reward the same behaviors and set up the same double binds.
And then Bruce had a wonderful question. How might we recognize exceptional organizations?
How might we recognize exceptional organizations? Well, from my point of view, where I'm talking about wanting, being passionate about women being successful, you will see equity in terms of the women in leadership, women with power. You'll see there's no gender pay gap. You'll see evidence like that, measurable evidence of women being able to thrive and prosper alongside men.
And Bruce, I did unmute you, just so you know, if you wanted to say hi.
Great questions, Bruce.
Well, I will take advantage of Jen's opening my mic, and I'll say hi. This has been great. One of my questions, as you keep talking more about this, of course I don't like these macho kinds of organizations either, but they're out there, and I try to find places within one organization that might serve as a role model for other parts of the organization, and I wonder, have you run into that? Have you ever seen any microcosms within an organization that had an opportunity to become more respected and have the more macho departments start to look up to them, so that that the good virus starts to spread?
Well, I certainly have seen pockets. You have you have the occasional leader, male or female, who is really able to create a very supportive environment, and the women and the men in their area are really thriving and feel wonderful about working for them and working there. And of course, you do see that. I don't see the virus effect, though. And in fact, sometimes that leader who's able to foster that environment, man or woman, gets dinged by their boss because they are seen as not demonstrating the right kind of leadership, even though they get good results. I've seen that happen to both women and men. What I talk about in my book is the importance of women and male allies really getting together and talking about what kind of culture do we want to have here, what would a supportive culture look like, and how do we work together to create that. And then I've seen those cultures change, but it takes really coming together, having a vision, a strategy, a voice, and then pushing for change. I've seen big change happen.
And have you noticed from your research, does this extend, and this is a question from Manibala, does this extend out of the workplace too? So how does this reflect in personal friendships?
Well, it does, absolutely. That's a great question. It does, absolutely. The same things are happening outside of the workplace, where we have different expectations of each other and we don't know how to talk about it. And I think that my central message, inside or outside, is talk about it. We got to talk, and it can be very difficult, but I think it's just important. It's just as important outside. My research is focusing on the workplace, but I think it's important in our lives to have healthy relationships. Period. I think life's too hard to try to figure out alone.
Great, thank you. All right, any other last-minute questions from anybody? And if not, we will. Yeah, go ahead, Kim.
John, I had a comment. At the ISODC Canada conference last year, one of the speakers shared that there are many more women in corporate leadership positions in Canada. And that was a big aha for me. And I'm just thinking that practice will make us better. So.
Well, there have been some very intentional things done in Canada that we haven't done here in the U.S. yet, I believe, like setting targets and goals. I'm not going to use the word quotas, but targets and goals for having representation, balanced gender representation. I'm not saying that they've reached balance, but they have certainly got better representation at the senior levels of all kinds of organizations, including government, than we do here.
Wow. Awesome.
In Europe, they've done some of that too. They've set that actually legislated targets and said that, by a certain date, boards of directors have to have, a balance of women and men. Corporate leadership has to have a balance of, or at least a third women. They've set some targets like that and actually made them laws in Europe in some countries.
Awesome. Thank you, Anne.
And so I think we're just going to close the session here. But we have a couple of closing comments and some things for Nexus. But first off, Anne, that was great. Your presentation was on point, and it really brought out some great things that we can learn, including tips and techniques, but also bringing awareness of your research and these types of phenomenon in the workplace. So I want to thank you so much. I thought it was a great session. Kim, any closing words from you, and then I'll bring up our last slide.
No, I just would like to encourage everybody to buy Anne's book. It's a great read. I think I'm ready for a second read. So, and thank you so much for joining us today, Anne.
Thank you.
Yeah, and any closing words, if you want to put them in the chat room or if you want to put them in the questions tab, just so when we're done with the session, when we give Anne the output and the reports from people that were here, we can give her some positive feedback. And then if there's any in chat room, I'll read that too as we leave. What you guys are seeing now is the next step slide, I hope. Is that right? And so we have an upcoming Nexus session. It's cultural competence for professionals, an essential requirement for work in the global community, and that's August 10th at 1. You'll get these slides and a PDF copy of Anne's slides for being here today. Make sure that you click on the link here in the top right to join the International Society for Organization Development and Change to see more about the work that they're doing and to get notifications on their conferences and the upcoming sessions that they have. And then at the end of the survey, you'll be asked to, or at the end of today's session, you'll be asked if you want to fill out a survey. And you'll be able to give Nexus some feedback and also give Dr. Litwin feedback on how the session went for you all today. So thank you all so much for being here. We really appreciate you coming to our webinar, and we will see you again soon. And I'm going to go ahead and escape out of here and see if we can bring in some of your chat questions. So we can see Bruce's bumper sticker was reinforcement of good stuff. I'll see if there's any questions. Rachel said, is it possible to get a recording? And yes, the recording of the session will go out with the slides in the session. So I think that we will go ahead and close. Thanks, everybody, for being here, and we will see you again soon.
Thank you.
Bye.